From television shows to pop star performances to clothing ads, there is one statement that seems to reign true across every dimension: sex sells. Whether it be physical images of sex, implications of sex stories in the news, or sex as a career, it is very easy to locate at least one reference to sex every day in the media we're exposed to. But I beg to ask the question, how is this affecting the adolescent experience? It is no secret that media literacy is growing among the youth and that sexually explicit content is becoming more and more accessible. Levesque in Adolescent Sexuality in the Media says that early adolescents, those 12 to 15 years of age, may have few options other than to use the media to shape their own conceptions of sex and intimacy. For the youth of today, life consists of shared feelings of being misunderstood and a lack of third spaces. Adolescents are finding new ways to connect with each other and with themselves, and that is through the internet. Adolescents are using the internet to shape their understandings of what being an adolescent entails. And with that constant reshaping and reconstruction of one's identity, it is important to be aware of the images and values they may be picking up. For my project for Psychology of Human Sexuality, I want to discuss the ways that youth's access to media and sexually explicit content shapes their expressions of their own sexuality, and how factors of gender, race, and body type may factor into those expressions. Today, I have my trusty partner in crime, Bashley, to help me. Discussions of these topics demand utmost sensitivity, so I thought that when we consult individuals who indeed at one point in their lives were youths who viewed sexually explicit content, we have Bashley to administer these questions. Without further ado, Bashley, take it away. Welcome to another electrifying episode of Girls Gone Wild. Today, we're at Venice Beach where the waves are crashing, the sun is shining, Bashley, and Bashley, no! This is the interview for the Human Sexuality Project, for Professor Ford, for your grade. Oh, oh, one second. Hello, I am Bashley. Today we will be interviewing a couple of close friends, Kirsten Kahn and Robin Verrill.
Hi, my name is Robin. I'm a sophomore and I study political science and Africana studies.
Yeah, I'm Kirsten. I'm a sophomore and I study Africana Studies and English. Whoop whoop.
Our first question is, did you have access to any sexually explicit content growing up? And if so, tell me what kinds.
Yeah, I had pretty open access to sexually explicit content. I think the first time I've ever viewed anything like that was in like fourth grade. So I was like around 11 years old. And it was like me and my friend. She was like, "Do you want to watch porn?" And I said, "Sure." And that was the first time I like saw like adult film, and it was really strange, and I was kind of scared. And I think after that, I just had access to similar kind of content through like third party websites and like using VPN and all that jazz.
Okay, my parents were pretty strict with my media. Like starting off from like when I was younger to when I was probably like in sixth or seventh grade. But I remember there was one very particular incident which shaped the way that I viewed sexuality and like sexually explicit content beyond like my parents are very religious and very conservative. So I already had that foundation. But I remember when I was like I think I was 7 years old. Um, I was playing like these games, like, like the little girl game websites that we had. And there was one that was like, it was like a kissing game where it's like, where it's like the guy and the girl, and it's like you have to kiss like in like a certain amount of time before like the parents see you in the game. And I was playing that, and my mom caught me, and she punished me like pretty severely, and like it like caused me like a lot of shame. Like I felt like a lot really ashamed about it. So like I didn't really seek out that much like sexually explicit content by the time I was like in puberty and stuff, just because like I don't know, I felt like very ashamed. But then by the time I did, it still was like pretty limited. But it was like more like videos or pictures. But my parents, they also had like parental settings on my like iPod and my iPhone for a while. So yeah, I would say like it was like a mix.
Thank you so much for sharing. Our second question is, do you recall any prevalent barriers or lack of barriers that made it more difficult or made it more accessible to view sexually explicit content?
Yeah, I think I didn't have any barriers, not nearly as much as I think I should have had, to have access to these kinds of like websites and videos. I had pretty free access to the internet. My mom didn't have any like child parent kind of situation going on there. And she didn't really check my history, so I had like a pretty wide access to it, and like there were little to no barriers.
Yeah, I would say that, like, again, what I said before, like my parents, they had like sometimes they would take my phone, and then of course, like with that particular incident, like they knew that they could like ban my technology for me, so sometimes they like banned my technology. Not necessarily over sexually explicit content. It would just be like, I don't know, like if I was having an attitude. So they had more control with my technology, and that did like prevent me from accessing the material.
Thank you so much for sharing. And for our last question, I want to ask, did your experiences with sexually explicit media in adolescence provide any values regarding your body, gender, sexuality, or race, whether or not you align with them currently?
Hmm. That's an interesting question because I think it most affected my kind of view of sex and sexuality in a lot of ways. And while that isn't one of the like variables that isn't the question, I think it has a lot of ties to gender and body together because that was also around the time when I started having a lot of like questioning my gender and like having a lot of gender dysphoria and being able to watch that content. I think it fed me a lot of images and like distorted images of what I would imagine myself to be, and I think uh, I don't align with them perfectly anymore, but they're still like the foundation of when I started questioning everything. So I have been unlearning a lot of them, but I think they had like a big impact on how I viewed myself up until very late in my teenage years. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think it did provide some values about my sexuality, I guess. Just like I guess kind of the way I viewed sexuality at the time. um I did not grow up in like a sex positive environment, so I think that like just like the nature of like how and when I accessed like this media, it felt like very secretive and like something I was like very ashamed of. So I think I don't know if that answered the question, but like it just made me, it like compounded my view of like sexuality as something that was like wrong and taboo. Yeah.
Whoa, I'm in different clothing. Hello. And that concludes the interview portion. After hearing about Robin and Kirsten's experiences, I wanted to point out a couple of patterns reflected in their responses. Though Robin and Kirsten most of the time refer to pornography in their responses, sexually explicit content involves all content that either shows or implies sexual behavior. Like stated before in the very beginning, this goes for ads, innuendos, and more. Tong in her article makes the connection that at its core, pornography is the sexually explicit subordination of women, graphically depicted, whether in pictures or in words. For as long as sexually explicit content has been made, it's disproportionately consisted of more female bodies than male bodies. We could go on and on about the patriarchy and the interlocking systems of oppression and the politics of sex that made the domain of porn a place that breeds some of the most horrid ideas. But to digress, this truly does have more of an effect than women on women than men. For young minds, it's difficult to be exposed to a certain type of body so many times because after a certain amount, you start to believe that's how you're supposed to look. A study done by Revealing Reality in 2020 found that 29% of 11 to 17-year-olds surveyed said that they felt bad about their body when they saw how people looked in pornography. Griffiths et al. Finds that in homosexual partners, higher pornography use is associated with higher body dissatisfaction, greater eating disorder symptoms, and lower quality of life. It is clear that the incessant output of sexuality explicit content is not only harmful, but it is not something that we can even need to argue about. Furthermore, referring back to the interviews, Kirsten shared that her experiences with sexually explicit media not only mentioned how she felt as if it altered her perceptions of her body, but she also mentioned how it affected her queer journey. For queer youth, the overabundance of heterosexual sex in media could usher in another era of sexual suppression, repression, oppression, or some combination thereof. It is difficult to come to terms with sexuality as is, but that process is complicated by the standards of heterosexuality being constantly thrown in our faces. That translates not only to the explicit content we view at young ages, but also to the images we're fed every day. Internet advances are moving at a speedy pace, but I want to pose a question. Is it reasonable to imagine an existence on the internet for adolescents that is not built on the tearing down of their image towards their race, sexuality, gender, and body? So much of what exists on the internet today is information and imagery of what aligns with the dominant norms. It's the type of messaging that says, you need to be skinny, you need to be white, you need to be heterosexual, you need to be everything that you're seeing right now and everything that you're not. Sure, parental controls exist to prevent harmful messaging like this from reaching children, but for people like our interviewees, Robin and Kirsten, children learn how to maneuver around them most of the time, anyways. And who's to say that the autonomy of the adolescent deserves to be decided by the parents? There are many cases for queer youth, and for those with strict parents, like some of our interviewees today, or in this video, parental limitations could actually impose harmful ideas of sexuality repression. Regardless, these narratives imposed on the growing youth through the media are undeniably harmful, no matter what racial, sexual, and gender identities the individual holds. So, do I think that we could ever come to a point where youths viewing sexually explicit content don't face this? I'm sorry to leave it at this, but frankly, my answer is I don't know. We don't have all the answers right now, and it's hard to tell whether someday we will. But the best that we can do right now is stand together, hold our ground, and try our best and support one another as best we can. I hope you enjoyed my project. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.